The Andy Poland Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Poland Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
Oh, weekend without football. We all survive, right? And it won't be long before we have football again. Sooner than later. We'll have college football in late August, but more importantly, we will have lots and lots of yak about the combine, about the draft, about mini camp, about training camp. It never ends. So don't mourn for the loss of football for a very short period of time. The All-Star game and the All-Star break weekend. We'll talk about that coming up. A big win for Maryland yesterday. Big win as they blew out Iowa in the second half, and now it's all about seeding for the NCAA tournament. Big game next week against number 11 Michigan State. And it looks like, Maryland is going to be a 4 seed, maybe even higher. We'll see what transpires over the last couple of weeks of the season. 5 games left in the regular season. Then you have the Big Ten tournament. If they stay where they are, they'll have a double bye, meaning they'll have an opportunity, a better opportunity, let's put it that way, to go deep or possibly even win the Big Ten tournament, which could make them a 2 or a 3 seed. Who knows? So it's looking good for Maryland basketball. We will get to that, spend some time on the All-Star Michigas from last night and from the weekend. And also, later in the show, in the 10 o'clock hour, there was a principled stand taken by Sparky Anderson 30 years ago today. We are in an era where principles, as we're seeing, are going by the wayside for a lot of people. And Sparky Anderson said, nope, I am not managing scab players. Sorry, check it out. You want to fire me? Fire me. But I'm gone, and I'm giving up my salary while I do it. It signaled the end of his managerial career, as he would manage only one more year. But what he did on 30 years ago today, I think deserves recognition. Before we get to the Maryland game, I wanted to mention this today. I went to the funeral of a friend of mine yesterday. He lived to be almost 89 years old. He died the day before his 89th birthday. Was born appropriately on Valentine's Day because he had a heart as big as the Grand Canyon. And his name was Bert Abramowitz. That may not mean anything to you. He was a salesperson, had a great career in a variety of sales endeavors, including at the end of his career selling real estate. But the most important thing about him was the kind of person that he was. And he has a touch to greatness in sports in a kind of an indirect way. He grew up in Brooklyn, went to Lafayette High School, and as he would regale people over the years with a booming voice as big as he was, 6'5", he was the center on the Lafayette High School basketball team, along with, Sandy Koufax and Fred Wilpon, who went on to own the Mets. And while he never achieved greatness in sports and international fame like Sandy Koufax or great wealth like Fred Wilpon to go on and buy the New York Mets, what he did as a human being, I think, puts him in their class and the class of people who have achieved greatness in their lives, really. Bert was the kind of person that, which once you met him, you never forgot him. He was, as his son said yesterday at the funeral, it's not what you say to people, it's how you make them feel. And Bert had that ability to always make you feel great. He spent the last few years of his life in, I guess they would call this assisted living. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but it's a senior citizens place in Crown in Gaithersburg. And whenever anybody new would move into the complex, he would say, "Welcome to paradise." And that's, kind of the way he was. And he gave me a lot of great Sandy Koufax stories over the years, some of which I've told on the air, and I'm sure we'll tell again. Most famously, Sandy playing on the baseball team with Fred Wilpon. Bert didn't play baseball; he played basketball, and it was Koufax at first base and Fred Wilpon the pitcher. They couldn't put Sandy on the mound because he was too wild. He didn't even go to college to play baseball; he went there to play basketball. And one thing led to another, and he got an opportunity to play baseball, and that led him to the major leagues, where he was signing with the Brooklyn Dodgers. This was before the draft, so you could sign with anybody you wanted to, and the Dodgers, the hometown club, wanted him. He signed there. But In hearing his kids, a son and a daughter, both middle-aged, and 4 of his grandchildren spoke, you got the picture of a life that I think everybody strives to live, that you impact people in some way, and that your family is the most important thing to you, and the love that you give to your family comes back to you. And that's what I felt yesterday at what was a packed funeral on a nasty weather morning, about 10 o'clock in the morning at the cemetery. And I just felt like he had accomplished so much in his life, and yet his claim to fame, so to speak, would be to have known Sandy Koufax and Fred Wilpon throughout his life. And his daughter said that she had contacted Koufax. He guards his privacy. Some years ago, I was instrumental in helping get Bert the number. We'd lost contact with Sandy, and I helped to get them reconnected. But his daughter called Sandy. He, of course, didn't answer the phone. I'm sure he screens every call that he gets. And he called back about 20 minutes later and was very sweet and said how much he had loved Bert and how much he admired him and had thought about contacting him and just never did it, which is another great lesson in life as we get older. If you have the opportunity to connect with somebody, don't pass it up because you never know. And Bert apparently died fairly suddenly. He had not been ill. But to have lived that kind of life and to be admired the way he was, that's a success, man. That's maybe not, going into the Hall of Fame as one of the greatest pitchers who ever lived or being one of the richest people in the world where you can afford a baseball team. No, that didn't happen. But the richness that he had in his life with love and what he gave and what he got back, man, that's hard to match, and I will miss him very much. We stayed connected over the last 30 years, had lunch a few times, and we're supposed to have lunch at some point, and I had not heard from him in a while, and then picked up the paper on Saturday morning and saw that he had passed away. So rest in peace, Bert Abramowitz. You are remembered by the many people that you touched in your life. All right, to the basketball game yesterday in College Park. And Maryland is on a roll right now. They are playing as well as they have all season. They have a player who is probably going to be an All-American and a lottery pick in Derek Queen, who's a freshman. And he has played great. But yesterday, what got them to this blowout victory was an unbelievable second half where they pretty much doubled up Iowa. They outscored them, 50-28 in the second half. That's 7 wins in their last 8 games. The one game that they lost, they had a big lead at Ohio State and couldn't close it out. But yesterday they closed it out in a big way after being down 4 at the half. They had, and it was one of the most amazing starts to a game I had ever seen. In the first 4 minutes of the game, the two teams had combined for 28 points. Occasionally you'll watch a game and neither team scores in like the first 3 or 4 minutes of the game. It was nothing but scoring, 3 after 3 after 3. And Iowa was on fire. They hit 8 3-pointers in the first half. I think Maryland hit 6. But then in the second half, it was a totally different story as Iowa missed all 13 of their 3-point attempts, and Maryland went on a 23-4 run and blew them out. And it puts them in a position now where if they win, let's say 3 of the last 5. I think that would cement them as a 4 seed, I think. And the big one is next Wednesday, a week from Wednesday, where they play number 11 Michigan State here. This is Kevin Willard after the game and asked, what happened. As well as they had played offensively in the first half, they had 11 turnovers. They were a defensive sieve in this game. It's 51-47 at the half. 51 points for a team in college basketball where you only play 20 minutes. That's a lot of points, even with the 3-point shot. And the second half, they were able to hold them to 28 and score 50 points themselves. And this was Willard after the game on what happened between the two halves.
We knew they were going to score us on the first half. If you haven't played against France teams, he's probably the best offensive coach, one of the best offensive coaches in the country. And we've been stuck on Thursday, Sunday, and we've traveled every Thursday. So we were gassed. I mean, I looked at, we practiced a little bit yesterday, but We didn't get back from Nebraska until 5 a.m. So Friday was a wash, and then yesterday was kind of BS. So really, I just told them at halftime, like, guys, we're only down 4. We should be down 20. And I said, let's just get in our press, get in the zone, try to mix them up a little bit. And I actually felt really good, the fact that we were only down 4.
How much were limiting turnovers a part of the discussion? 11 in the first half and 2.
It was besides transition defense, but that was a big thing. We watched film at halftime, and 6 of their threes were off turnovers. So, I felt pretty good about that. I knew we wouldn't turn it over that much, and it's a little bit of when you don't practice for 2 days and you've traveled. Sometimes you got to give college kids a little bit of just give them a little bit of benefit of the doubt that they'll figure it out. And this team's figured it out a little bit.
You know what I've noticed about Willard? This is his 3rd year. He's not really an excuse maker, but he does give his team a little bit of leeway. And he often talks about the schedule when things don't go as well as he would hope that they would. And so to talk about the travel schedule, well, it's that way for everybody in the Big Ten. For example, USC is coming here from the West Coast to play a game this week on Thursday night. You don't think the time difference is going to mess with them? You think the travel it's a fact of life, but he likes to give his team a little bit of a break there, and they're playing really well at this point. As for what they did defensively in the second half, where they basically, shut the door on Iowa. It wasn't just that they were knocking down threes in the first half. That opened up the floor where they were making layup after layup after layup. And what they did defensively in the second half was basically, as he says, wake up.
Eventually they're not going to make every shot. So I loved our defense. I loved the way we switched out in the second half. I thought our pick and roll defense was much better in the second half. Our first half, I don't know what we were doing, but it was a good adjustments by the guys. And
if you look at how they played this year, a lot of the times when they win, it's when Derek Queen has a big game. Queen had a good game yesterday. He had 18 points, but he had only 4 in the first half. And in the second half, where they got away from shooting threes all the time and started to work the ball down low, Julian Reese, I've never seen a player at Maryland, and I've been watching Maryland basketball for over 50 years. I've never seen a player make improvement like he has from year 1 to year 2, but in this case, it's from year 4 to year 5. I mean, he was a liability on the court at the end of games because he couldn't hit free throws. And this year, he's been money from the line. He's right around 70%. He doesn't have that hitch in his delivery. And time after time after time, he has given you double-digit numbers in both points and rebounds. And once again, he was the real difference maker for them inside in the first half and continued his fine play in the second half. He wound up with 16 points, took only 9 shots, 7 of 9, and he hit both of his free throws. That's been big. And as far as Queen goes, Queen is not going to be around for 5 years like Reese. That's for sure. He's probably going to go. And although he was not as big an offensive factor in the first half, as the season has gone along, he hasn't had these kind of games which he had in the first half of the season where it just was a mess, a disaster of a game. And he's gotten more and more consistent. And this is what Willard says is the reason for that.
He's just gotten used to the physicality. I think that's the biggest thing. In high school, he's going up against guys that look like me. Then you come into this league and you go through it. I think he's gotten used to the physicality, the size of the league, and I think he's adjusted really well. He's not doing the same things he was doing earlier. He's realizing he can use his skill on the perimeter a little bit more. He's going off the bounce a little bit more. I just think he's adjusted really well to the physicality.
Yeah, and look, with those two guys inside, they don't have much scoring off the bench. They got their first bench points in 3 games yesterday. Geronimo had 6 off the bench, but if they are clicking and if they stay out of foul trouble, this is a dangerous team, and there's no team in the country that's got 2 athletic big men like that. So, it could be that it's an early exit and they got foul problems and, they just don't have enough depth to hold up. Or if they get rolling and they stay out of foul trouble and there's no injuries, knock wood, this is a team that could make a run. Some more college basketball. I never thought I would see the day where I would spend a Saturday afternoon in February watching Alabama and Auburn play, the Iron Bowl. You watch that game usually in November, right? That's college football at its best. But the SEC has really jumped up this year, and they got teams that could win the national championship and teams that are going to be among the top seeds for the NCAA tournament when the seedings come out next month. On Friday, Jay Billis, who was in Tuscaloosa to call that game with Dan Schulman on Saturday. On Friday, he was on PTI with Tony Kornheiser and Mike Wilbon, and they talked about the incredible success that the SEC has had this year.
4 of the 5 top-ranked teams are from the SEC, 9 of the top 25, and now here I go. As a child of the Midwest and Chicago and the Big Ten, I'm saying, hold on, I am not buying this yet. Jay, is there a trap door that somebody can fall into? Is there something coming in March that could derail this, or am I just flat out going to be wrong?
Well, it depends how you value the best conference. Like the best top to bottom, the SEC is the best conference there's ever been in college basketball because of the number of quality teams it has. The last time a conference was this powerful, it was in the mid-1980s in the Atlantic Coast Conference. But the ACC was 8 teams back then. This is a 16-team league. It's a lot easier to have 8 good teams than it is to have 16. Now, that doesn't mean that the SEC is going to have all 8 Elite 8 teams and all 4 Final Four teams in the national champion. It doesn't mean that Duke's not going to win the title or Houston's not going to win it or Iowa State. Those are 2 different things. And I kind of liken it to the best golfer. Like, just because you win the World Match Play Championship doesn't make you the best golfer in the world. Those are 2 different things. But I think people value the tournament so much that if the SEC doesn't do really well in the NCAA tournament, people are going to say, they weren't the best conference. Those are 2 different things. But I think the SEC has more teams capable of winning the title, specifically Auburn, Florida, Alabama, than any other, and Tennessee too, than any other conference. Nobody has this kind of depth and power 1 through 16. It's not even close.
Yeah, because they got so many teams, as Jay points out. Now, he mentioned the ACC in the mid-'80s, and I'm trying to think. Obviously, North Carolina and Duke were good then. Maryland had good teams with Len Bias at the time. Georgia Tech was really good. I didn't really look back and see this, but I know this just from the top of my head and from being at this Final Four. The Big East had a year, 84-85, which I'm sure is not going to be matched again. 3 of the 4 teams in the Final Four were from the Big East, and 2 Big East teams played for the championship. And it wound up being one of the great upsets of all time as Villanova beat Georgetown, playing essentially the perfect game. They shot 78% in the second half. There was no shot clock, no three-point line, so things were a little bit different. But that was supposedly an unbeatable Georgetown team. That was Patrick Ewing in his senior year, and they wound up losing to Villanova. But in the final rankings that year, Georgetown was number 1, the final regular season rankings. St. John's was number 3, and 3 times that year, Georgetown and St. John's had played as 1 versus 2. That's incredible. Syracuse was 15 that year. They did not make the Final Four. Villanova not ranked at the end of the regular season. They, of course, won the championship. And then you had Pitt, BC, UConn, Providence, and Seton Hall. So you had 9 teams, 3 of them ranked, but most importantly, 3 of them made the Final Four. The other one was Memphis State. And they wound up losing to Villanova in the semifinal. Georgetown beat St. John's in the other semi. That was, I think, the 4th time that they had played that year. It was really remarkable. And I remember the late, great Lou Carnesecca, being very emotional about having an opportunity to coach in the Final Four. He had coached forever at that point, and he went on to coach maybe another 10 years or so. And he said what an honor it was to coach in the Final Four. But he said, look at this Georgetown team. You're going to put them right with, like, the Indiana team of 1976 with the 5 pros. This is one of the great teams of all time. He was already giving them their coronation after beating St. John's in the semifinal and could not have imagined what would happen on championship night 2 nights later. So I think if you're looking at a conference which was dominant, and not that the SEC is not this year, but they got so many damn teams, to have 9 teams and 3 of them make the Final Four, I don't think we'll ever have a percentage like that, even close anymore. I don't think it'll come anywhere near that. All right, coming up, we'll do some football. More stuff about Justin Tucker to deal with. We'll talk about that. Plus, hey, got another draft coming up, and quarterbacks. No need to worry about quarterbacks here for a change. Stay with us. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Bram's coming up at 11 o'clock today. Also, in the next hour, we'll spend some more time on the All-Star. I call it a mess. I mean, the players aren't interested in playing in it. They've changed the format. Okay, maybe it was a little bit more competitive. But there was a time when the All-Star game was played fairly close to a game. There was some pride in trying to become, the best team in your conference, right? Or the best conference, I guess, is the way to put it. And now it's devolved into just, whatever it is. And they're keeping it alive because there's money. It's part of the TNT contract. Now, TNT's out of the NBA business next year. I guess it all goes to ESPN. They're probably going to want it. But it's just not good. We'll do that the next hour. Meantime, a couple of stories. And I always go back to what Tony Kornheiser said after all the OJ stuff, where he said, in the post-OJ world, we don't know anybody. And for years, Justin Tucker was the beacon of greatness in Baltimore. He was the best kicker in the history of the NFL. He is also a very accomplished opera singer. Once he leaves football, we'll see what happens after all this, but the assumption was after he left football, he would step right into opera and become one of the great opera singers of all time. 60 Minutes did a feature on that several years ago. He does Holly Farms chicken ads and other things in Baltimore. He's a Baltimore icon. He has been with the team longer than any other player. He helped them win a Super Bowl. He holds the record for the longest field goal in history, 66 yards. And until last season, when he started to miss some, he was the most accurate kicker ever. But then came some reporting from the Baltimore Banner, and there were first 7 women who had come forward to say that he had been guilty of what had happened with the Cleveland quarterback back when he was playing in Houston. And now 7 additional massage therapists have accused Justin Tucker of sexual misconduct. That's 16 women who say that he was inappropriate during sessions. One of the massage therapists said that in 16 years of doing this, she had never seen another man's penis except for his, that he made an effort to expose it to her while she was doing a massage. Tucker, 35 years old, called the allegations unequivocally false, adding that the women took innocuous or ambiguous interactions and skews them so out of proportion that they are no longer recognizable. He says the Baltimore Banner's initial report, he has not commented on the 7 additional women who have come forward. In the initial report, he called it desperate tabloid fodder. And he also denied inappropriate or being banned from any spas. His lawyers said in a January 28th letter that Tucker never behaved inappropriately. They also provided a sworn declaration from the owner of Baltimore Spa and Salon saying he never received complaints, or she never received complaints about him or suspected he had engaged in misconduct. But 2 of the spas said, yes, we'd asked him not to come back. And he had signed a 4-year, $24 million contract in 2022, so he's got another year left on that. Not guaranteed, but the NFL says they're going to look into this. Look, this is now a full-blown thing, and at the very least, the NFL needs to suspend him from off-season activities until they complete their investigation. And this is the same organization that had Ray Rice punching out his then girlfriend in an elevator. It's got to be 12, 13 years ago. And they couldn't find any video. They found the video of him dragging her off the elevator, but the indication was she had passed out drunk or something like that. But then they found the surveillance video in the elevator after TMZ had no problem getting it from the hotel. And the NFL, we couldn't find that. Oh, really? See, the NFL, I think, selectively investigates things. And I say that because this now popped up yesterday. You remember the Jonathan Martin, Richie Incognito story? This goes back to 2013, where Martin accused Incognito and other teammates of bullying him. It led to a suspension for 1.5 years for Incognito. And the implication was, well, the NFL doesn't stand for any of that. So Richie Incognito, but by the way, is no angel. I mean, they have a voicemail with him using the email, the N-word on it. So there was stuff with him, and he was hardly a choir boy during his time in the NFL. But now, a decade later, Jonathan Martin says, oh, no, there was actually no bullying. I never believed for a second that I was bullied. It's a story I've been trying to fix for 10 years. We hasn't been trying very hard because we just found out about this yesterday. After the allegations, and apparently his mother took it to another level. He said something to her, and she pushed this forward. The NFL then retained lawyer Ted Wells to investigate. I think he also did Deflategate, if I'm not mistaken. And the report found that Incognito, along with two other offensive linemen, Mike Pouncey and John Jerry, had engaged in a pattern of harassment of Martin. The report added that Martin had checked himself into a hospital and his mother had flown across the country to be with him. Incognito missed the second half of the 2014 season and the entire 2015 season due to his suspension stemming from the incident. So it cost him a lot of money. And he did come back and play for 3 more years. He played with the Bills. He played with the Raiders. But Martin's career, he was a high draft pick who's just didn't pan out. He wound up being traded to the 49ers before the 2014 season, but retired the following offseason, citing a back injury. And then Incognito has responded to this. He said that the whole thing was made up by Martin's mother and father. He couldn't cut it in the NFL, so he quit, and his mom blamed me. Legacy media pushed the narrative long and far. Too bad it was all a lie. They lied to protect his money. He quit. The team had every right to claw back that money. His mom started the bullying narrative with Adam Schefter, and so the Dolphins wouldn't go after his signing bonus. And then his father agreed that they did intervene and they did try to protect their son and the bonus. But this is the kind of thing that the NFL wants to say, oh, bullying, we investigated that, and we made sure that we took care of that. But Ray Rice, no, they hid their head in the sand until finally the video surfaced from the elevator, and the Ravens were complicit in this. They had a ridiculous news conference with Ray Rice and his girlfriend, where she didn't say a word and he didn't really express any contrition. Then they, I think, announced a 2-week suspension, and then they had to cut him when the video came out. The whole thing with Spygate, remember that? Where that was Roger Goodell's first act, and the way he settled it, he asked the Patriots to turn over all the evidence, and he burned it. He buried that. They don't want to have that, But this is something that looks good for the NFL. Oh, we don't tolerate any of that. Well, it turned out it was not true, and Incognito is now somewhat vindicated in this, and Martin is finally admitting a decade later that he lied about it. Yeah. And so the NFL, while you look at their justice, it's selective justice. And Deflategate, as much as Bill Belichick was hard and fast with the rules or loose and fast with the rules, if you read the report, there's no evidence there that they deflated the footballs. This is just a bunch of made up stuff, and it was a make good by Goodell for the way he handled Spygate. So once again, selective justice by the NFL. All right, on to other pressing matters like the draft coming up, and it's going to be here before you know it. And in between, all we're going to do is yak about the draft. But it's as they say in life, timing is everything. And can you imagine that it's this year versus last year that the Commanders have the number 2 pick with a need for a quarterback? And now Caleb Williams, he may still turn out to be a generational quarterback, but we knew he was coming out, and we knew that Daniels was going to be at least good. We didn't think this good. This year, it seems to be a big yawn at the top of the draft with 2 quarterbacks, Cam Ward, who may or may not be good, and Shedeur Sanders, who may or may not be good. I think we knew that both quarterbacks were at least going to be good. We didn't know Daniels would be this great, and I think there's still hope that Caleb Williams can be great. But these two, it's a yawn, and it's kind of cool to sit back and watch this and go, yeah, yeah, hey, look at that draft, because the Commanders not picking until 29. I mean, you're looking at, maybe a defensive lineman, defensive back. That's a best player available situation there. Not a need, not a need. They will find their holes filled with others, free agents, so forth, secondary, defensive line, linebacker, things like that. So this is Mike Mayock, who I don't think is still working for the NFL Network. He was at one time, became the GM of the Raiders, got fired in that job, but follows the draft closely and joined Rich Eisen last week to take a look at what's at the top this year.
Cam and Shador, in whatever order, are 1 and 2. I don't think you can put them in the top 4 from last year. I thought Bo Nix might be an interesting comparison for Shador. I think both of them are going to have to go to a place that's a good fit for them. Realistically, Rich, you can go back over the last 20 years and look at the NFL draft in the first round at quarterbacks, and at best, it's a 50-50 proposition. And most of it's because kids get pushed up higher than they should go, and there's a bad fit, right? Mm-hmm. So that's why Bo Nix was so interesting to me last year. I don't think I gave him enough love last year. He was a better quarterback than I thought he was. But most importantly, he went to a coach and a system that was a really good fit for him. They surrounded him. They put an infrastructure around him, not unlike Minnesota did with the USC retread this year. Thought Kevin did a great job supporting that situation. So for me, I think quarterbacks probably go too early most of the time, but most importantly, it's about the infrastructure and the fit. And if you don't make that kid, if you don't look at the kid in Carolina right now, he played a little bit better this year, but it was a stark comparison to him and C.J. Stroud in year 1. And, you look at Jaden Daniels, what a great fit. What a great job they did. I think Caleb Williams is just as talented. Be interesting to see what happens there. So, I mean, that's my diatribe on quarterbacks and where they end up, and that most of them get pushed up higher than they should go.
And so who's currently right now sitting atop your draft board? Who's number 1? Who's the best prospect that you think is available?
I'll put it this way, and you'll laugh because you've heard me say this before, but
yes.
I think Cam Ward has the higher ceiling, and I think Shador has the higher floor. So, Cam to me is a little bit more of I don't want to say boom or bust, because I don't think he's a bust, but he's got a chance to play at a very high level because he's very gifted. I think Shador is a little bit more like Bo Nix, where he's really accurate, really smart, good decision maker, needs to get to the right place where they take advantage of those things, because I thought he did get in some bad habits in the pocket in the last 2 years with that awful offensive line in front of him. So what is interesting to me, Rich, is behind those two guys. I think the kid from Ole Miss, Jackson Dart, has made up some ground. He can spin it. And he's not a great athlete, but he's not a bad athlete. Jalen Milroe is the guy that has first-round talent all over him. Big, strong, fast, big arm, but had a bad year this year. Too many question marks. I'd love to get him in the second or third round and have no pressure to play him, put him in a system behind, like Green Bay's done the last several quarterbacks. Sit a guy for 2, 3, 4 years, let him absorb it and learn from it, polish his craft, and come out and start 3, 4 years into his career. That's the guy that I'm intrigued by.
And what about overall? Throw defensive players in, everybody in, at the entire draft in a hat. Number 1 atop your board is who, Mike?
Number 1 with everybody, it would have to be the corner/wide receiver from Boulder. I think he's rare. I think he's special. I think you and I could have a great conversation about the running back situation in the NFL, and has that changed? The undervaluing of running backs because of what happened in free agency a year ago, with Saquon and Josh Jacobs and the kid in Baltimore and the 7th round pick for Joe Mixon. But that's a way of saying Ashton Genty to me from Boise. Man, is he fun to watch. I love his tape. I think he's special. I think his contact balance is rare. I think he's a first-round running back. And then the two guys that I love watching, Rich, are Abdul Carter from Penn State.
He's amazing.
Who I think is a high-level edge rusher day one. And there's a kid at Georgia that reminds me a little bit of Micah Parsons, and his name's Jalen Walker. And two reasons he reminds me of Parsons. One is in base defense, he's an off-the-ball linebacker, just like Micah Parsons was at Penn State. And then when they go to sub, he lines up anywhere from the A-gap out to the 9 technique, the wide defensive end. But what he does best is explosive and rush the quarterback. So those two guys, Jalen Walker and Abdul Carter coming off the edge, they get me fired up.
Yeah, I don't think they'll be there when the Commanders pick at 29. That's Mike Mayock, used to be with the NFL Network and former GM of the Raiders. But they do need a rusher, that's for sure. And it's going to be Myles Garrett. Are they going to make the move for that? We'll see. Can they move up in the draft to take one of those two guys you just mentioned or somebody else? That's key. And the running back, for years, and I agreed 100% with what Mel Kiper said. I don't know how much he's changed his philosophy with Saquon Barkley, but it seems like the league is moving back towards running back. And Ashton Genty, who had this great career at Boise State, he could be a high first-round pick. For years, Mel said never take a running back in the first round. Kind of the philosophy that Mike Shanahan had in building those teams in Denver. You can get running backs. Just build your blocking scheme to block for the runner, and you're going to have enough, and you don't have to overpay these guys. But now with Saquon, not that Saquon was the Super Bowl MVP, but the fact that Kansas City, as they say, loaded the box to try to control him, and you saw that Jalen Hurts was able to beat him with his arm and his legs. That is a big, big addition. So I think you'll see more emphasis on the running back in the draft. But we got a lot of time to yak about that. That's not coming up for another couple of months. All right, coming up in the next hour, the All-Star format. Draymond Green says, quite frankly, it sucks. We'll get to that more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. I would think at some point in all of our lives, we've had an encounter with a celebrity, right? I mean, at some point, you were on a plane with somebody famous. You were in a restaurant with somebody famous. You were in an area, and you may or may not have talked to this person. But what if you're kind of a celebrity and you meet a really big celebrity? How do you handle that? More importantly, when the celebrity recognizes you, how do you handle that? Interesting stuff from Ryan Fitzpatrick, who had all of 16 snaps with Washington some years ago, now with Prime. He was on the Rich Eisen show last week with memories of what he encountered during Super Bowl week in New Orleans last week. He's got a good story about Kevin Costner, which we will get to. Before we roll into what was, just another ridiculous all-star exercise, didn't resemble basketball. Meantime, hockey. Now, hockey is really... They hit on something big here. This is really getting a lot of attention. To be honest, I haven't watched much of it. I may watch tonight as Team USA over the weekend knocked off Canada. This 4-country tournament that they've got going on has really worked well. It's the consolation match this afternoon, 1 o'clock. Canada plays Finland, and then tonight Sweden plays the United States for the championship. And it's a 2-week break for hockey. That's good for the players. Alex Ovechkin said Russia's not playing, so he's not even watching. And given the state of the world right now, I don't know if we could have Russia involved. Maybe next year that'll happen. But this is working. Now, next year they take a break for the Olympics, so we'll see if it comes back in 2 years. But they did away with their All-Star game because it was ridiculous. The NFL did the same thing with the Pro Bowl. Now they have these fun and giggle games where they play touch football, okay, whatever it is. And then basketball is on the brink. It really is. I don't know what you do because I don't think last night was considered to be a success. But before I get to that, I want to go over a story from Saturday, which is the best thing I read all weekend. It's something that was totally not on my radar, but is one of the coolest things I've heard in a long time, and I'm surprised that it hasn't gotten more play. Good for Candace Buckner for getting this story about Blake Harper, who is a guard at Howard University. Now, Howard University, that's a program that has gone through some real ups and downs over the years. Kenny Blakeney, who was a former player at Duke and a former assistant to Mike Krzyzewski, has taken over that program and really built it up. But it's only, so far you can go with it. They play in a gym that seats 3,000 people. They play in the MEAC. They're not on TV very much. And it is kind of a program that takes a back seat, obviously, to Maryland and Georgetown, and for that matter, George Washington and George Mason, and maybe even AU. I mean, it is not on the radar unless they've got a team that's really good. They were in the NCAA tournament the last couple of years, but they'll always go in as like a 15 or a 16. And if they win a game, that'll be a miracle. But they are that type of program. But they have a guard who's local. His name is Blake Harper, and he is the best player on the team and the Mid-American Athletic Conference's top rookie. 6'8", he's averaging 19 points a game. And you might say, well, what's a guy like that doing at Howard? This is an NBA prospect. They're getting scouts at the game. This is a story of how, it's never too late to really improve yourself. He was a player at Gonzaga, but not a starter. Came off the bench. Gonzaga's got the best program in the area. They're number one. And just to play at that level automatically makes you something of a college prospect, but certainly not a college star. And he dealt with weight as he was growing up. He was nicknamed Chubbs in middle school. And he, by his own admission, carried too much baby fat around with him and showed up at Howard weighing 248 pounds. He's now down to 220, so he's lost 28 pounds. And, a lot of guys get in better shape in college, but they don't make a transformation like this. A guy who played junior varsity as a sophomore in high school. Guys who play JV, they don't usually rise to stardom in college, but losing 28 pounds made a huge difference for him. He now dunks, which he said he couldn't do before. He's 6'8", couldn't dunk. Now he takes off 28 pounds. He can get off the floor. And he says, every time I dunk now, I'm still not used to it. How about that? Like, oh, hey, I dunked the ball. And it seems that when he showed up, they made a big effort to get him in shape. They had an overseas trip, and they said, you ain't going unless you pass the conditioning test, which he barely did. They call them Talladegas. I guess we would call them suicides generally, running baseline to baseline. But in a December 11th game against Virginia, Virginia University of Lynchburg, so that's I guess a satellite campus of Virginia, Howard became the first freshman in the past 24 years to post a 30-point triple-double, scoring 30-30 to go along with 13 rebounds and 10 assists. So this is Blake Harper, not Howard, but Harper. Harper did that, and he is, somebody that the scouts are keeping an eye on. And while it's, usually a good idea if you're overweight to lose weight, I don't think most people have a transformation like this. So that'll be fun to keep an eye on where he goes in the NBA and how he develops. But if you said, oh, there's a chubby freshman from Howard back in November who's going to be on the radar as a draft pick, a high draft pick, you'd say you're nuts. But obviously he's been able to do it. Draymond Green didn't play in the All-Star game last night. He was part of the All-Star festivities on Saturday and that skills competition. And he was on the TNT set talking about Candace Parker, who coached one of the four teams in what was the new All-Star format last night. They had the OG team, which were the older guys. They had the Chuck Barkley Global Stars, the Kenny Smith Young Stars, and then the fourth team was coached by Candace Parker, the Rising Stars. So Draymond took it upon himself to rip the Candace Parker team, even though he's not in the All-Star game, and what he feels about this new format with players who are young stars playing against the All-Stars.
Candace goes, I'm coaching some team, and she's right, some team that no one wants to see.
Oh, man.
I had to work so hard to play on Sunday night of All-Star Weekend. And because ratings are down, because the game's bad, we're bringing in Rising Stars. That's not a fix. I never played in the Rising Stars game. My first 2 years, I didn't touch that game. And these guys get to touch the All-Star floor on Sunday night? Like when the floor is the floor? In America, the president has Air Force One, right?
Yeah.
They have several of those planes. It's only Air Force One if the president's on it. That's the All-Star floor. You have the court, you have the events. It's a nice-looking court. When the All-Stars are on the court, now it's the All-Star court. Those guys did not make the All-Star team. To be playing in the All-Star game and you did not make the All-Star team is absurd.
Do other NBA players have that? Like, are the OG teams they're facing, are they going to come out and go, let's end this right now? Because that passion, if that's on the court, that's beautiful.
But they're supposed to do that. I don't think you necessarily get excited and be like, oh, we're excited. We got to beat these dudes. They should beat them in their sleep anyway. But I just think it's they're doing this to pump All-Star up. I think that's dumbing it down even more. You put some rising stars out there, first, second-year guys that's nowhere near All-Star level, by the way. And they're going to play against All-Stars.
I'll just say that just seeing this right now is getting you going.
What is this? Those guys play when? Friday?
Yes, Friday.
They didn't even get Saturday night. They got Friday. Now they play Sunday night. Come on. No, thank you. But the NBA also has to do some things to make guys want to play, like up the money. Maybe you're tying home court advantage of the finals to the All-Star game.
Did
which
that
team
before,
wins?
I feel like
they do that. They do that in baseball.
Yeah, that's
or the Four Nations thing that the hockey's doing right now, where it's four nations against each other.
Really
up the money. Dr. J and the big O want to talk to you.
Yeah, exactly.
They played 50 years ago. That's not our fault. You work all year to be an All-Star, and you get to play up to 40, and then you're done. This is so unfair to Victor Wembanyama, who just took this game really seriously, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who just took this game really seriously. When you talk about chasing after the points records, Melo and Kobe and all these guys who've had great scoring nights, they don't get the opportunity to do that with this game. Also, we can watch some rising stars. We're about to watch the Olympic team. Now we get the treat of watching the Olympic team play against a U19 team. Come on, what are we doing? This is ridiculous.
Yeah, Kenny's team is done, by the way. Chuck won. Kenny's team was one that's eliminated.
Yes.
Yeah, so SGA's still in it, Victor in it. But you're talking about the scoring records that we've heard. Tatum leading all scores, 55 a few years ago. It's harder to catch now.
They can't do that. They don't get to etch their name in the history books. It's a reason you get an All-Star, Kobe Bryant All-Star MVP award.
Scale of 1 to 10, your thoughts of the format?
10 being the best.
Yes.
A 0. Sucks. Same basketball.
No, it's not. But that's on you, Draymond, and that's on you and your generation of players who turned this game into a joke. Last year, a total of 397 points were scored between the two teams. That's not basketball. Basketball includes both ends of the court. Some defense. And if you're not going to play any defense the way these guys can shoot and score, it's ridiculous. And I didn't watch much of it last night, but what you saw was still, the half-court shots. And, Steph Curry was the MVP, as would be preordained since the game was in San Francisco. I mean, that's your fault. If you would take this seriously, then it wouldn't have come to this. And it wasn't that long ago that this was a real game. I've told this story many times, but we're going back now 24 years when the game was in D.C., at the MCI Center, which was relatively new, and it was the East versus the West. And I remember I was working with Mel Kiper, and we did our shows from the practices. Larry Brown was the coach of the East, and he was running sets, and he had plays, and he was actually coaching the team. And the East fell way behind, and he made the move where he put Dikembe Mutombo, the late Dikembe Mutombo, with Allen Iverson. And they made their move. And off of that, when the trade deadline was like a week later, instead of now, it's earlier before the All-Star game. But at that point, it was after the All-Star game. He made a trade for Dikembe, and the 76ers went to the finals. They actually won a game against the Kobe Shaq Lakers. So it was a real game. And if you look at the score, I think the winning team had like 110 or something like that. It was actually basketball. But when you turn it into this, a joke, this is what they have to try to get people interested. And you can say pay more money to the players. No, that doesn't do it for them. They don't care. It's irrelevant. They really cared about the money. They really cared about the league. That's the big thing. And when you talk about what the league used to be, when I first started to be around it in the late 70s and the early 80s, I remember working in San Antonio and Dallas, and players like Dr. J and Magic Johnson would come through town, and they understood the responsibility to sell the game, and they were great competitors. These guys are great competitors now, but they basically blow off the regular season knowing they're going to make the playoffs, and then they get interested when you get in the playoffs. So you can't do it that way. And you've got to treat the All-Star game as a prideful thing, part of your profession. Do the best job you can instead of turning this into, just a sideshow is what it's become. And so you can rip it, Draymond, but you helped to create it. Your guys did this. The guys before you, they didn't do it this way. They treated this like an actual game. And then on top of that, here's LeBron, the OG, the in some people's minds, the greatest player ever played. Well, he shows up, and he's talking about, maybe I'll be in the slam dunk contest next year. He's 40. And, we're going to be out there, and we've turned it around because we realized how ridiculous the game was going to be. And then, getting the pregame news conference news this way from LeBron.
Tonight's game, you got Stephon Castle and the Rising Stars team going up against the OGs, you, KD, Steph. Kind of what's your approach to that new format, and what will we see from you tonight?
You won't see anything from me tonight. Unfortunately, I would not be in uniform tonight. Still dealing with ankle and foot discomfort, so I will not be playing tonight, unfortunately. I hate that, but I'm looking forward to seeing the format. This is the first year for it. I know we got a lot of great, call us the OGs. That's hilarious. We do got a few guys with gray hairs, so that it makes sense. But, that should be fun. I saw the quote the other day with DK with somebody who's going to play against me. So I guess I'll see him at practice, and hopefully I'll be in practice. We can go at it then.
Yeah. I mean, look, you're telling me he woke up yesterday and realized he couldn't play. He knew he wasn't going to play in this game. And he went through the whole charade of showing up and having everybody, look at LeBron, 40 years old. Michael Jordan played in the All-Star game when he was with the Wizards, when he was 40 years old, when he had to have his knees drained before every game, and he went out and he played in the All-Star game and played a lot. Now, the All-Star game was already becoming ridiculous at that point. This would have been 2003. But he played and helped to lead a comeback in that game. Yeah, he treated it like something. You didn't even bother to play this new format, at least, as the OG of the league. Don't you at least put your support behind it, make an appearance, maybe only play 10 minutes, whatever it is. But, and then, Draymond whining about the scoring record. Well, what does the scoring record in an All-Star game mean where the winning team gets 200 points? And nobody cares what All-Star game records are. They have no concern. Again, basketball has only two numbers that matter, and they're both held by Wilt Chamberlain. Actually, three numbers. Number one is 100 points in a game with no three-point shot. Number two is averaging over 50 points a game, which he did that season. Number three is averaging more than 48 minutes a game. He's got all three. He never left the court. He averaged 50 points in a game. He scored 100. Does anybody know or care what the scoring records are for All-Star games? And Draymond's going to make a big deal out of that? And then you got your biggest name and your guy who's being mentioned as the greatest player of all time going, yeah, I was thinking of playing, but I woke up this morning, my ankle doesn't really feel good. Come on. And if you weren't going to play, open the spot up. Let somebody else get in the game. And, are they going to stay with this next year? People have been saying this for years. Wilbon has been pushing this forever. International stars against American stars. I guess with nothing else to do, why not try it next year? Why not? The league has more European stars than it's ever had before. So work out the format like that next year. And you know what else is getting old? Whining about the All-Star game. So let's put that aside. Coming up, 30 years ago today, Sparky Anderson was presented with the prospect of managing Scabs, and he said, nope, not me. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Rams up at 11. We were in a very, very interesting period 30 years ago today regarding baseball. If you recall, the 1994 season ended with a thud. There was a lockout, and they couldn't come to an agreement on a new contract, and the players were not going to budge. And so for the first time in history, the postseason was knocked out. There was no World Series. And as we got closer to the 1995 season, there still wasn't resolution on a new deal. And it also, had an effect on basketball as well, a big effect, as it turns out, because Michael Jordan had played baseball during the 1994 season. He had not made the major leagues and wasn't going to make it in 1995 either, but he was in the White Sox camp as they were getting ready for the season. And when he was told, the owners are going ahead with playing the season, but they're going to do it with replacement players, he said, nope, not me. I'm not doing that. And that's when he went back to the NBA and made that famous return on a Sunday afternoon against the Indiana Pacers. Did not make it to the finals that year in 1994, but the following season, 94-95, that started the second three-peat, which ended with The Last Dance, which we all watched during the pandemic 5 years ago. But anyway, it was also the decision that was made by the manager of the Detroit Tigers, Sparky Anderson, who had won 2 World Series with the Big Red Machine in the 1970s, and in 1984 had led the Tigers wire to wire to the World Series championship. He's now with the Tigers, and they're getting ready to play in 1995, and there were questions about how the game would go on. Replacement players were being offered $5,000 to come to spring training and another $5,000 if they were on the field for opening day and being paid, I guess, the minimum or maybe less than that, whatever it was. They weren't going to have major league players. The Players Association, they wanted to sit out, fine, like the NFL had done in 1987. They were going to go with scabs. And Sparky said, nope, I'm not going to do that. He said he would not return until the regular players did. He said, please, let's don't think such a horror story that we're going to have baseball with replacement players. I don't like my intelligence insulted by telling me this is the Detroit Tigers. And he was making over $1 million at the time, which was a lot of money 30 years ago. And he said, fine, I'm not going to take my salary, but I'm not managing these guys. And, they eventually came to an agreement. It was pushed by Judge Sonia Sotomayor, who was a judge in New York at the time, and she ruled that it was unconstitutional for them to use replacement players, which led to a resolution of the strike. It turned out, though, the bad blood that Sparky had encountered here with the owners in doing that led to him being forced out the door at the end of the season. They finished 60-84. Fourth in the AL East, and that was it. But during that 1995 season, after they came back, and remember that was the year that Cal Ripken broke the Lou Gehrig record, Sparky was in New York with the Tigers playing the Yankees, and he was on Ed Randall's Talking Baseball show and talked about the stance that he took 30 years ago today when he walked out of the Tigers camp and said, I am not managing scabs.
The reason I did this was for me and nobody else. I cannot be a part of a farce, and I will not tone it down. This was an outrageous portrayal of a farce to the American people. And you cannot do this to baseball people. And it's proven this year that you do not play games with baseball people. They've had enough of it over the years. And they've tricked them a little bit, and they've come back. No more. The party's over. The fan says this way, you'll give it to me straight up from this day forward, and you're going to give it to me, or you ain't going to have me in your seat no more. And that's the way it should be. And I will say this, I am prouder of the fans this year than any one thing, because they showed they will not be betrayed. And you cannot come up with something like that. All you had to do in that whole incident was lock all the gates. Every camp be locked up. Now sit there like two grown-ups, player association and ownership, and fight this thing out. But don't one side try to play an end run and bring a joke and a fiasco to the American people. I won't be a part of that. I won't have that on my name. You know that thing, the baseball thing that was done this winter by Burns? I thought it was tremendous. And I don't think there was ever a better job done about things. But they're going to have another one, and it's going to be over 1994 and 1995. And when that one comes, I don't want my name attached to it. And I told my children, I told my grandchildren, Grandpa will never be involved in that. Don't look for him because you'll never see him.
Well, he actually was part of that story, and he would have been included. I don't know if Ken Burns did an update on the documentary, which came out that year, 1995. But yeah, Sparky stood his ground. He stood it on principle, and he never managed again after that season. He resigned at the end of that year, I'm sure under pressure. And he was only, he always looked older than he was. He was only 61 at the time, passed away at the age of 76, 15 years later. A Hall of Fame manager with 2,000 career victories versus 1,800 losses, 3 World Series titles, 2 with the Reds, and 1 with the Detroit Tigers in 1984. And if you look at the length and breadth of his career, for a guy who really didn't have much of a playing career, he stood with the players, and that's what helped to make him as successful as he was. In fact, as the Tigers opened that season, 1995, in Anaheim, players from the Angels dugout stood up and gave him a standing ovation when he was introduced as part of the opening day lineup for the Tigers in 1995. So it's interesting to look back on that period of time and say, what if? And what if there were no replacement players? Would Michael Jordan have stayed with baseball? I kind of doubt it. I think he had an itch to get back to play in the NBA, but that hastened it. I think that was something that brought him back, and then the following year they started their second three-peat, and that wrapped up with the Last Dance year. And then he sat out 2 more years and then came back here and played with the Wizards. So pretty remarkable. This is, by the way, in case you don't know, President's Day. It started out as George Washington's birthday, but I saw an interesting Associated Press story about this. He was born February 22nd, 1732, near the Potomac River in Virginia. But here's the thing. You may not be aware of this, but the calendars changed. He was actually born February 11th under the ancient Julian calendar, which was still in use for the first 20 years of his life. The Gregorian calendar, intended to more accurately mark the solar year, was adopted in 1752, and they added 11 days to it, right? I mean, what do you put on your checkbook in the 1700s? Oh, I don't know. Is it the 22nd or the 11th? Either way, Washington paid little attention to his birthday, according to MountVernon.org, the website of the organization that manages his estate. Surviving records make no mention or observances at Mount Vernon, while his diary shows he was often hard at work. Like, he was not a big birthday guy, yet they needed some way to honor him, so they came up with, George Washington's birthday. I seem to remember that in elementary school. They used to call it George Washington's birthday. And I'll get to the memorabilia bit in a bit, but apparently memorabilia was big right after he died. He died in 1799 at the age of 67. That was a long time in those days. The life expectancy was much shorter. And according to historians, that George Washington and his culture was important, and people wanted to have a part of that. It was not until 1832, the centennial of his birth, that Congress established a committee to arrange national parades and festivals, according to congressional research. The official designation for the holiday is Washington's birthday, although it has become known as President's Day. Arguments have been made to honor President Lincoln as well. His birthday, February 12th, so they were 10 days apart. By the late 1960s, Washington's birthday was one of 9 federal holidays that fell on specific dates on different days of the week, according to a 2004 article in the National Archives magazine. The Uniform Monday Holiday Act took place in 1971, moving President's Day to the 3rd Monday in February. Sales campaigns soared, and eventually they added Lincoln into the mix, and now it's just President's Day, which is just really a day for sales. And speaking of the memorabilia, in 2002, a letter that Washington wrote to Thomas Jefferson sold for $2.4 million. And now there is a new letter that was written in 1777, which compared to that seems to be a bargain. But I guess it's got different context than the letter to Thomas Jefferson. The letter, more than 240 years old, is written on both sides of a single sheet of paper, an 8x12. It is stained and discolored in many places, and what looks like a grimy fingerprint near Washington's ornate signature is on it. An Ardmore, Pennsylvania firm that buys and sells historical documents announced that it had acquired the rare letter and is putting it up at $150,000. Well, if it's $2.4 million for a letter to Jefferson, the difference here is they believe that Washington probably dictated the letter to an aide, as he did with most of his wartime letters, and then signed it with an ornate signature. The future president wrote his letter from his headquarters in Morristown, New Jersey, to General Samuel Holden Parsons was his name. So if you want to, shell out, I don't know about the memorabilia market, but it would seem to me that if you got another letter that's $2.4 million, and I know it's to Jefferson, but another letter that's $150,000, that might be a great investment for somebody. I mean, I don't have that kind of money to gamble with, but that makes for an interesting piece of memorabilia, a Washington signed letter. Okay, that's enough of that. Bram is coming up next, and I'll see you back here tomorrow at 9 a.m.